So I'm going to ask you some questions on improving at Smash. So what are
Smash
some
Bros. Singles and Melee singles are now closed.
So I'm here with
True Blue, Captain Zack,
Dath, blank.
Blank. Okay, cool. No, it's simple, straightforward. What are some of the most important things to consider when trying to improve at Smash?
Well, some things to consider are like your bad habits. Like you should look at your matches, say, okay, I'm doing this and I did this consistently. Because sometimes there's just certain interactions and it's not exactly your bad habit, but just picking a wrong decision. But a bad habit's just constantly doing the same thing and noticing it. That's a good way to improve.
And I know a lot of people say like the neutral is like the most important thing, but neutral is something that kind of just comes with time. I think like the most important thing when you're trying to improve is just grinding out all your tech skill and your execution, because a lot of the time it doesn't really matter if you know what you're supposed to do if you can't do it. Like if I know when I shield this move, I'm supposed to do this, but I can't execute my combo properly, it's gonna hurt me a lot more than being bad at like rock, paper, scissors mental game stuff. If I'm getting, they're letting me get punishes on them like shield grabs and I'm not getting my combos or I'm not doing everything right. So I think tech skill is probably at least the easiest one to grind out, and then neutral just kind of comes with time.
Okay, so make sure your execution is on point. Tech skill, execution.
Yeah.
Things that you can actually practice in training.
Yeah.
Okay.
When trying to improve at Smash, you have to think about the options, the players, the data in the game, like the frame data of your character, what's punishable, what's not punishable. There's like a lot of things that you have to take into account, that it's just like when people start out, they should just start out with frame data first, and then at that point like you start learning how like people think, and that's like the higher stepping stone of like when it gets to high level play, is just playing off people being human beings and like how much people can react, because reaction's another thing too.
You have to sort of be able to watch yourself and criticize yourself. So going back, watching your own matches, looking at, okay, what did I do wrong here, and how can I fix that? And then that's just like every interaction, even like, okay, so why did I get hit here? Why did I lose my stock here? You know, why didn't I follow up here? You know, all these kinds of things you have to consider, and sort of just like look at yourself, criticize, and then how do I improve?
Okay, that makes sense. So basically watching your own videos and being critical of your own mistakes and areas that you can use to improve on yourself, right? What are some of the biggest pitfalls when it comes to trying to improve at Smash?
Some of the biggest pitfalls is that like when people go into training mode and they try to do combos, they do it in the training mode and they feel like it should always work, but then they play against a player who can mix up their DI, they can do something different, or they just have different like mindsets. Like, oh, if someone's just like in front of me, why are they gonna throw out an F smash? And then you unshield trying to punish them for standing there, and then you just get hit by something.
Yeah.
So it's like the biggest pitfall is like when people just practice at home by themselves, or if they practice with a specific player like multiple times, when they don't have the experience with a lot of random players.
I'd say they get too focused on themselves, because it's not only looking at yourself and your bad habits, it's always looking at your opponent and their bad habits. You have to constantly just be aware of the other person too, as well as yourself. So I feel like people focus too much on themselves or too much on the opponent sometimes.
Okay, that makes sense. So not only focus on yourself, but you also have to realize what's going on with your opponent too and their bad habits.
I think a lot of players, they just sort of play, and then they're like, oh, I played for X hours, why didn't I get better? Well, if you just sit there and play and you're just practicing playing and you're not practicing getting better. So when you go to your friend's house or when you're just playing by yourself, try to think of something before you start playing that session or that day, and be like, I want to improve on my combos, or I want to improve on my reads, or something like that, and then focus on doing that. And that way, you know, during the day, you're focused on doing that. So while you're playing that day, you're focusing on improving on a specific thing instead of just playing normally. And I think that's a great way to actually improve as well.
So basically practicing with a purpose, not just going over your friend's house and playing for a long period of time,
Right.
and expecting to get better.
Right.
Like they're not willing to learn how to learn, because I think the most important thing is being able to learn how to go back, study your VODs, see what you did wrong, fix that, and just learning how to learn, I think, is like one of the biggest pitfalls. And then I think the other one is when people get stuck on like, I want to play this character no matter what. Sometimes the characters can just hold you back. Like if I want to be the best Jigglypuff ever, and like I want to get top 8 at a national, realistically that's not going to happen. Like it's not the character I want to play, but these are the results I want to get, so I'm going to play this character.
But some people would argue with that point, like things like Renai.
I think Villager is a character that's good enough to do really well.
Dath?
Yeah, Dath is excellent, but I feel like these are all still higher echelon characters.
Okay, compared to like a bottom.
Yeah, like
Jigglypuff
you shouldn't be
Smash
playing like Charizard and expecting to get like top 16 at like a super major. It's those things where like sometimes you just have to be like, you have to evaluate whether it's you're holding yourself back and you can improve.
Okay.
So I feel like eventually there's a point though where like once you get to that top level of play, it doesn't matter like how good you are as a certain character. If you're like, when Diddy Kong forward airs, I can't punish it ever, no matter what. You just run into that brick wall of like, I ran into a Diddy Kong and I can't beat it in bracket.
Okay, that makes sense. So sometimes you have to look and evaluate what's actually holding you back.
Yeah, whether it's you and your habits or your mental
character.
game, your character.
What would you say to a player who feels like they have plateaued, hit their apex or that glass ceiling, and they're trying to overcome that and get better and reach the next level?
I feel like it's more like a mental block. It's not necessarily that the player's skill is capped or that they've reached some specific level where they can't really improve because of some mindset. Well, the mindset is just that they don't feel like they're improving, but they actually are.
Okay.
And improvement takes time. So a lot of people will like practice and then they'll be like, oh, I must have reached some sort of peak because I'm not performing better. Well, everybody else is also trying to improve for the most part. And, it takes time for all that practice to actually show. If you're trying to learn something, think if you're going to school, it doesn't take, 1 day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks even. Sometimes you take a class for 3 months, 6 months. So you have to keep putting in that effort for a long period of time. I don't think there's actually any sort of glass ceiling. It's just keep pushing that improvement because it's mostly a mental block, I think.
So a lot of times when people reach their glass ceiling, it's because at their locals they're playing someone and they always lose to that person and they just don't know what they're doing wrong. They just have to like look at those videos or matches and they just have to figure out what's going on that's player based and not just like frame data based on the player. And at the same time, like even if you are losing to that player multiple times, that when you go to different regions, you can have insanely better results. It's just that person that you're playing in your local, it just knows you that well. So just because that you lose to the same person in your local over and over doesn't mean that you won't do well out of region when you play against people who don't know you.
I just feel like it's a breakthrough of a bad habit because when you're stuck on a level, it's because of something bad that you're doing. Once you reach a certain level and you're only doing good things, that's where the game becomes more mental. And so you need to work on your mentality more than like you're playing. Like if you're good at a combo and consistent with all of them, you need to look at your mentality and say, okay, I'm doing this wrong in tournament, not necessarily period, like in game.
Okay. So it's not only about what's going on in the game, but also your actual mentality as well, you'd say.
I think there's a couple glass ceiling moments as you improve. I think the first glass ceiling is like mastering your character. Because like if your execution isn't on point for your character, then that's a problem. You need to hit that first. So if you're messing up combos, that's one glass ceiling. You're never going to get past that level of like, look, I know what I'm supposed to do, I just can't do it right. And you'll always lose because like I'm getting my hits, but I'm not converting my kills properly. I'm losing because of that. That's one glass ceiling. Then the other one's learning all your matchups. So you hit a glass ceiling when it's like you run into a random character that you lose to, and it's like, okay, this is hard, I need to learn this. So like I think learning matchups is another one. So once you learn your character, once you learn your matchups, then it comes down to just player skill. Because once you're doing everything right and you know what you're supposed to be doing, eventually you just run into players who are more experienced than you and understand the game a bit better.